it's not easy to do what you did. You made my men look like a bunch of minimum wage mall cops. That's hurtful. Would you like to tell me where you received your training? Afghanistan? Chechnya? Who are you?
I have sacrificed much to achieve peace. For, through your arrogance and stupidity, you have opened these peaceful realms and innocent lives to the horror and devastation of war.
You are a vain, greedy, cruel boy. And you are an old man and a fool!
You're unworthy!
Father.
And now take from you your power! And I cast you out!
Please open your eyes.
Oh, no, this is Earth, isn't it?
Where'd it come from?
Your ancestors called it magic. And you call it science. I come from a place where they're one and the same.
He has disobeyed his king. His fate is in his own hands now.
I will end this.
Wow. I forgot that movie came out in 3D.
That's when everything came out in 3D. That's one of the things that ruined The Hobbit. Was everything had to be in 3D. It's interesting to see that movie's trailer again because we have a lot to cover with this.
We do have a lot to cover with it. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the MCU ReVU. We are in the, first, I'm Elliot Serrano. There is John Clark. Missing tonight is our third Dave Pinto. We are in the missing Dave formation.
I feel like phase one is before Dave Pinto really joins the MCU.
Yeah, we're still trying to
show without him.
He's done a couple like background appearances, just to establish his character. We'll really pull him in. Later on.
We've laid the seeds for the Dave Pinto subplot in the show.
And his own spin-off films.
Yeah.
But tonight we're going to be talking about that trailer that you just saw for Thor, starring Chris Hemsworth. Man, I'm telling you, I was jazzed when they announced this one. When I saw that trailer, I was jazzed. They pull that whole sequence out from the Ultimates, that whole bit with Thor fighting the soldiers, and we'll see him also fighting some hospital interns. Makes it look totally badass in the trailer until you see the movie itself, and they completely change the tone on that.
Well, we'll get into it. When I first saw this movie come out, I was like, really? Thor? Is that what? That's who you got? Because I was never a big Thor fan, but this movie was actually in development for a very long time, as long as Iron Man. But we'll get to that. First, I want to welcome our guest who's sitting, waiting patiently, and had to restart his Mac to come on here.
Hello.
Right, gentlemen, this is comedy writer, head writer of Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, writer for The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, just so you don't know that he worked for Jack Parr, because he's not 140.
I wish.
A good friend of Caffeinated Comics, Mike Drucker.
Hello.
But you can say it again.
Hey, my browser wouldn't let me use my webcam.
Oh, that's really helpful. That's what you want for this.
Mike, when John told me you were going to be on, I was really excited. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And geeking out a little bit with us about Thor, and also by any means, feel free to talk about any other entries of the MCU films. Feel free to riff wherever you want. This is just we're just having a little fun tonight talking about this film among other things.
Yeah, a little known fact about Mike: he did write a Spider-Man story for Marvel Comics.
I did.
So got farther than either you or I, Elliot.
It was like a 6-pager.
in the indie.
Well, if all I got to do is write for the Tonight Show so I can finally break in with Marvel, easy. I just needed to know what the route was.
It's a circuitous path, but you can get there.
Yeah, it's like one of those pommiers, like the bakery elephant ears. Round and around.
Yeah,
and when you pick it up, it crumbles immediately.
Right, yeah.
So we're talking about Thor, directed by Kenneth Branagh, after many, many directors talked about directing this film. Came out in May 2011, starring Chris Hemsworth, relative unknown, discovered by Joss Whedon during the shoot for Cabin in the Woods. Suggested him when he talked about the Avengers. Also Natalie Portman, Tom Hiddleston, another unknown, and Anthony Hopkins just chewing up gold scenery. Yeah. Also Idris Elba in a thankless role.
Marvel really shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah,
putting him in the
Dennings
MCU.
in a very thanked role, I feel. Kat Dennings got way more mileage out of this movie than Idris Elba did. But let's jump right in. Watching it again, which I haven't done in a long time. Mike, what were your thoughts seeing it?
Rewatching it, I hadn't seen it in a little while. I'd seen it since 2011, but I hadn't seen it in maybe 2 or 3 years. And I realized it's probably, in my mind, the most fine Marvel movie. It's not bad. It's not good. It's fine. Right. Does that make sense?
It makes sense because we just finished Iron Man 2 and Incredible Hulk. So yeah, fine.
Like, it's not like, oh my God, they did it. But it's also like, oh man, they didn't do it. You're like, yeah, I guess that's Thor.
Yeah, they did one.
They did them. They did Thor. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt about it. I was like, well, this is how you put a Thor together. It's like, we're going to fight the Destroyer. All right. Loki's going to turn on us. Okay. Frost Giants. Yeah. Like, are we leading to anything? Not necessarily.
Yeah. Thor is sort of like the Attack of the Clones of the MCU, where suddenly it's now very important to the rest of the universe. Like, at first we were like, we can ignore this, right?
Yeah, the only difference between this and Attack of the Clones is Spider-Man wasn't playing next door to it.
True.
Because that killed Attack of the Clones for me. When I finished it, I just looked at my date and said, hey, you want to catch the last hour of Spider-Man again? But Elliot, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, well, first, for full disclosure, I love Thor. Thor is one of my favorite characters. And I did like how they evoked the Kirby universe, or the Marvel universe Kirby style in this film. They make the Rainbow Bridge look cool and not hokey like it always looked like in the comics.
Yeah, there's a pixelating effect that in the theater I was really impressed with. I was like, oh, that's how you do it live action, because traditionally it was drawn as a red bridge next to a yellow bridge next to a green bridge next to a blue bridge.
And mind you, for this film, we do finally get a peek at the more fantastical elements of the Marvel universe that James Gunn is going to take to the next level when he does Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, definitely. Like, the big statues in Asgard are very Kirby, but it did remind me, I'm like, that it's like, well, it's Kirby, but we're going to get way more Kirby with Guardians of the Galaxy. And then with Thor Ragnarok, which for all intents is not the third Thor film. It's like the rebooted Thor film.
Yeah.
Because that goes mind-bogglingly Kirby.
See, so because when I watch this, I'm going, wow, this movie went, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect film, as Mike, as you said, it's fine, it's fun. I mean, I remember watching it watching it the first time and saying, hey, you know what? I liked it. Was it great? Not great, but I didn't dislike it like Hulk.
Right.
Right. And then this time watching, I'm like, oh, the plot holes just jumped out at me a little more because when you know the story and you start picking up things that happened along the way, you know, oh wait a minute, I thought, what happened to this, and why are they doing that, and so on. But still, when you take this movie and let's say you put it next to Eternals, which like stripped out all the Kirbyism from it, all the stuff that would have made it fun, and just totally on it. I'm like, okay, I still got Thor. Thor had a little love for Kirby, whereas Eternals was like, do we really want to admit that this is a Kirby creation? Can we, like, you know?
I still haven't fully processed my experience with Eternals.
Well,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike. Go on.
Oh no, I cut you off.
Well, but still. With
Nothing helps a podcast better than people waiting for somebody else to talk.
You know what? Politeness is lost in society, and I think it's important we bring it back.
We need more dead air, I think.
We need more dead air.
You're seeing something new, folks. A bunch of nerds on a podcast letting each other talk.
We're all holding the same door right now.
After you.
Oh, no.
Wait,
You hang up.
Canadian?
This is what happens when low self-esteem reaches middle age.
Well, we all know who the alpha in the room is right now. Okay. So, anywho.
I don't
now
know.
I really don't. I had us all as equals for a while, and then I was like, wait, you boosted the EQ?
But anyway, so I will say that the two things, Mike, maybe you observe this on your rewatch. I found this amusing that, mind you, this is before Disney buys Marvel.
Yes.
And yet this really felt like a Disney-fied Marvel movie because Loki totally Lion King's Thor pulls a whole Scar telling you, oh, you know, you're responsible for your father's death. Like it felt totally Scar and young baby Simba in that one scene, right? Yeah. I'm like, oh wait, they Lion King. And then the ending was totally Hercules. When Hercules is descending into Hades and he's getting, he's going to die, and they're going, and I'm going, wow, they pulled two plot threads from other Disney movies into a Marvel movie, so
this is what people expected to happen when Disney bought it, and they've actually done less of it.
Yeah.
Since then. Well, let me ask for this, Mike. When I asked you to be on the show, I said pretty much every movie was open because I asked you very early, and you said Thor with a question mark.
Yeah.
So what made you decide Thor and then doubt that decision?
I think it's because Thor is like one of the Marvel movies I've watched the least, I think. Or at least it's been a while since I have, like, at least like even the train wreck ones I'll put on in the background because they're train wrecks. But I don't know, for some reason Thor and Thor 2 just never really get into the rotation. Thor Ragnarok does, but not Thor 1 or 2.
I've seen Thor Ragnarok more than either of these two.
You know what it was? I think what I took away with it when I first saw it, and especially 2, but a little bit with this one, was I was not like I was bored and some like, I'm bored by this, but I was like, oh, this is okay. All right, guys. Like it just felt like it felt tedious to me. And I liked it a lot more this time. But it was a movie I didn't return to because it wasn't so bad. It was entertaining, like Hulk. Right. But it wasn't so great that it was worth returning to. It was almost like, I don't know, Thor again? No. So I wanted to see it again.
Yeah. Dark World, I'm going to have a lot more trouble when we get to that than this. I feel like the biggest issue I have with this movie starts and stops, and it's not so much confused as it just tries on different movies every 15, 20 minutes.
Right.
And I feel like because the MCU just hasn't crystallized yet, they haven't found their specific tone. Branagh started working on this right around the time Iron Man came out, so they didn't have that. They didn't have that like Kevin Feige Russo machine yet. They were still trying different things. They were kind of like where DC is right now. Like, let's do a Joker, and then let's do a Suicide Squad, and let's do a Batman. So it doesn't know what it wants to be. So we get like a Game of Thrones for 20 minutes, and then we get like a love story for 20 minutes. We get a comedy for 20 minutes. We get Superman 2 for a little while, and then we get a CG fest. It's like it's weird because Kenneth Branagh is known for being a huge personality, and he's created these epic Shakespeare, and now he's running around with the craziest mustache I've ever seen, which, you know, he directs those movies, so that's his choice. He's like, no, wax it more. And here he's just so, it feels like tentative. It's like, well, do you like gods? Well, maybe you don't like gods. But do you like Natalie Portman? Do you like the desert?
And it comes off that way. It really does come off that way.
Yeah, it's funny. I watched it with my 8-year-old. It's one he's never seen. And he watched the whole thing, but every 15 minutes he asked when it was going to end.
It was like a car trip.
All he said was, the only things he said for the whole movie, and then went back to playing with Legos, was, when is this ending? And, oh, I didn't know Stan Lee was in this one too. That was...
Oh, what? That's so nice.
Yeah, that was the extent of his... And honestly, I can't argue with him.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, Stan Lee's in this.
Don't tell him anything. Just let him come do it organically.
This is what I did with Star Wars with them.
There's another movie that Thor kind of reminded me of. I don't know if you guys have seen The Game with Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
The David Fincher film.
Sean Penn's in that. Yeah.
Sean Penn. Because as they're going, The Game pretty much introduces Michael Douglas's character as this total a-hole that, as he's getting tortured throughout the movie, gets broken down to, you know, mush until he's like in the middle of like the Mexican desert, and he has to walk into a bar and ask if someone can give him a ride home, something like that. And then you really feel for him by that point, because you know he's been through so much. And at Thor, they try doing that in this, where they introduce him as this arrogant, you know, he's like, I'm the baddest guy on the block. I can kick anybody's ass. And as, you know, Odin tells Thor, he goes, you're arrogant, you're selfish, you're cruel. I remember going, wow, I forgot that he actually calls him cruel at one point.
It's while he's doing it.
Yeah, I'm like, something I'd never associated with the character in the past. But you see that bit where it's like he doesn't care about others. He just likes to win. And then the movie has to break him down over time. Unfortunately for me, especially after seeing The Game, it wasn't convincing enough that, you know, this guy's spirit is really broken. I mean, if anything's going to break the dude's, well, okay, it should be convincing. Once he meets the woman, that's when his spirit starts getting broken. So, you know, that's
just like all of us.
Yeah. But yeah, again,
3 middle-aged divorced men.
Oh boy,
yeah.
Let's not turn this into another therapy session, John, like last time.
That's why I do this.
What film was last time that turned into a therapy session?
Was it Iron Man 2?
No, it was Spider-Man when we talked about the man. Why are we going there?
You brought it up.
Yeah. Because it's funny.
We're just planting signs that say don't go this way.
Yeah,
and we're like, it's an arrow, though.
You know, it was 3 guys. We were talking about Spider-Man No Way Home, and it was 3 Spider-Men, and they were all sharing as well.
They're all getting old, too.
One of them had butt implants.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about this being like the broken down and redemption arc, because that's exactly what Iron Man 1 is. But I feel like that was way more... that was way more easy to take, because Tony's broken down so hard in the beginning, and he builds his way out, and then he plateaus, and he builds his way up, and he plateaus. So that's really interesting. I feel like with this, you're right. It's very expositional of, like, you know, Odin just says you're stripped, you're sent to Earth, and then he just kind of lays there. He kind of lays there until he tries to get the hammer. He's not worthy, and then he's still kind of flatlining. And then then they fight the destroyer. And I forgot how that fight ended, but like he almost dies from the destroyer, and then the hammer just saves him. It's like Doctor Strange's cape. It's like, oh, you're in trouble, Thor, and then he's like worthy again. So I do feel we don't have an arc with him as much as we have a plot that pushes him there.
Or with Doctor Strange. Speaking of Doctor Strange,
yes, if Benedict Cumberbatch had made Sherlock in 2005, maybe Doctor Strange would have helped him.
Was it me? Okay, tell me if you guys agree. Did the scenes between Hemsworth and Hopkins feel completely different than the scenes between Hiddleston and Hopkins? Because I'm telling you, first, Mike, I don't know if you heard about this. I remember when Thor was in production, you kept hearing all these rumors about friction between Hopkins and Hemsworth. Again, Hemsworth, the relative unknown, having a hard time, holding his own against the Oscar winner. Yeah. And I guess Hopkins was like getting on him. And it didn't seem like they were. Chris Hemsworth at that point wasn't really able to bring his game up. Where you put Hiddleston in there, I'm like, holy shit, this guy is like, man, right. He's there. Yeah. I mean, I found those scenes really. I'm not saying that the acting wasn't a little over the top in every case, but there seemed to be more of an energy to Hiddleston's performance as opposed to Hemsworth, who's like I think he's just trying to be loud, that's my energy, maybe that's just me. Yeah.
No, I think Hemsworth is not a good actor yet. He's kind of broy in this, and I don't really buy him. And ironically, I think the turning point for Hemsworth is Ghostbusters, because that's when he really relaxes and he's really funny in that. The next time they use him is Ragnarok, and then it's just like, oh, you're really funny. Let's let you be funny. And in this, I feel like he's trying to be the action star in this. And he's not experienced. I mean, he's not that great in Cabin in the Woods. He's great now. Like, I'm really interested in him now. And maybe it's an idea of respect. Tom Hiddleston, is a British kid that's coming up the Shakespeare route, very similar to Hopkins. So he may have gotten more respect on the set than this big, blonde, broy Australian that they hired because he was big and blonde.
Mike, you're our guest, and I feel like we've been just shutting you out on this whole thing.
I feel like I've talked most of it. Okay.
Again, no team.
I didn't see. It's hard for me to judge acting, but also I feel like with Thor, he didn't have a lot to work with the character. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's just the acting. I think it's a two-way street. I think he was not a great actor, but also was Thor supposed to be serious? Are we laughing at him? Is he like a god, or is he like a god? I feel like Tony Stark, even I wouldn't say America knew who Iron Man was, but we fucking hit that note. Sorry, I swear. Is that all right?
That's right. No, okay. We're good. It's in the past.
They hit that note so hard, so fast, but with something like Thor, you were like, okay, is this sort of like a Dungeons and Dragons Marvel movie? You just didn't. His character just wasn't much to work with.
Well, we don't even start with him. I mean, you're right. We get the Lord of the Rings prelude in the beginning of this. We get Anthony Hopkins.
Right.
Anthony Hopkins giving narration, and then we have this battle of the Asgardians and Frost Giants, and clearly trying to be Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. But we don't even see Thor for a while. We see more Odin than we see Thor.
Yeah.
So you're right. We don't know who he is. And I don't think we get to know who he is in this movie.
No. And I don't think we do in Thor 2 either. No. Avengers, we do a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, and
that's a symptom from the comic books too, though. I mean, you read the Thor comic books. This is a thing that always used to drive me nuts about the comic books. I really liked the fact that originally it was supposed to be this mortal, Donald Blake, who discovers this cane and inherits the power of Thor. He becomes Thor because he finds this Norse artifact that, imbues him with this strength. I mean, it was essentially Stan Lee ripping off Captain Marvel at that point, saying,
and Superman.
Instead of saying Shazam,
you didn't want to give the Marvel universe a Superman, and he's like, well, Superman's a god. Let's actually do a god. And Kirby was all for it because, as we said before, Kirby spent the next 2 decades trying to create gods on Earth, which would eventually become the Eternals.
But then even before the movie comes out, if you read the main Thor comic books, the 616 Marvel universe, it's like he's a Norse god. they have never outside, even with when Walt Simonson does his run on the comic book, you know, they never really tap into what it's like to be, you know, a god who's, you know, near millennia old. You have this incredible power that, you know, I mean, again, people consider you to be a god, that you're worshipped. But when you get into their heads, they're like anybody else. They're like any schmuck on the street, which to me, I can never reconcile when it comes to how the Norse or any sort of gods, quote unquote gods, are portrayed in fiction. So then you have to go over to the Ultimate Universe when Mark Miller recreates the Avengers, and he puts in this little doubt, at least for the Ultimate Comics, that is this guy really a Norse god, or is he this superpowered dude who's also delusional, you know, who thinks he's a god, which is what they play with in this movie a bit. Although we already know the guy actually is a god. You know, we know that he's, you know, this extra dimensional or terrestrial superpowered being that just happens to look like a person. And when he loses all his powers, he looks like a hunk, you know, who can wear the low-rise jeans. and like, man, you know, I will say this. How many guys took their girlfriends to see this movie and ended up getting dumped by them afterwards?
Well, it depends on who else is in the movie theater. You don't see Chris Hemsworth every day. Chris Hemsworth isn't giving out the popcorn.
I know, but all dudes like me, like take my girlfriend, and she's like, "Oh, there are men who look like that. Why don't you look like that?" Baby, I can wear low-rise jeans. In fact, sometimes I have to because they won't.
Sometimes normal jeans become low-rise jeans.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, we're all Thor in our own way.
But I mean, we were talking about this. Last week, the last MCU reviews, that these movies were they were trying to make these movies appeal to women, right? So in every Thor movie, you get that cheesecake shot of shirtless Chris Hemsworth, so that the gals can go, oh, you know. And hey, you know what? That's great. I think do it. Give it to him. You know, we have enough, you know, women in tight clothes and doing the, you know, the butt shots and, you know, Scarlett Johansson. Why not throw something out there for the gals too? Have Chris Evans in a tight T-shirt tearing logs apart with his bare hands. You know, I have no problem with that. But
well,
damn,
I think it showed some restraint on their part to get Natalie Portman and not get a female version of Chris Hemsworth, get somebody who's an equal, because they play up the love story mostly in the middle of the film, but they play up that there's a real connection. It's not just physical.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, I was watching that. I'm going, I couldn't tell which was less convincing. Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman, or Christian Haydenson and Hayden Christensen. Look at that.
Yeah.
Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman, you know.
What about Zach Braff and Natalie Portman? You want to throw that in the mix?
Oh, man.
See, I at least stand a chance. If you compare me to Zach Braff, I got a chance there. I've got a bit of a small chance.
Like, for what? A chance for what?
Damn, Mike.
Now, Mike, how big a Thor fan were you going into this? Because Elliot said he's into everything. I'm kind of like I'm kind of like that one era. I'm like, once you read Walt Simonson, you're done. Like, I don't think I've read any other run that I like as much. Even the Lee Kirby stuff, it's good, but it's Fantastic Four is better on a monthly basis. Captain America is better on a monthly basis for me than Thor. How deep is your Thor? If I could quote Barry Gibb.
Very shallow Thor. Well, I mean, I don't think it's very shallow. It's the fact that, again, like the movie almost, I read a ton of Thor comics when I was in middle school and high school. And, you know, you see the character in other books, but I read a couple runs, was never super into Thor after that. And it just never became part of, like, you know, what I'd get each week. So really not that deep. Thor is not a character that is not that I don't dislike the character of Thor, and that's why I also think I was interested in seeing the movie again. It's a character I'm so neutral on that it sometimes struggle with him. Does that make sense?
It definitely makes sense. I think he's one of the most DC like of Marvel, and
That is true.
And I would always get into arguments with Stephen Brown, who co-hosts Captain of Comics with me, because he loves the Avengers, and the Avengers are actually my least favorite section of the Marvel universe because they're the least weird. You know, like Spider-Man is my favorite. It's real weird. Fantastic Four is just crazy. X-Men prides itself on weirdness, and then the Avengers are kind of like, we're the superheroes. We're the DC superheroes, and Captain America is the most good and the least conflicted, and then Thor is like the most powerful. But I had a hard time latching onto Thor too because, like you were saying, Elliot, he was originally conceived as Don Blake turns into this, and that didn't make sense to me because even within the Lee and Kirby run, they're like, no, but he's really Thor. And that's like, well, then how is he Don Blake? Oh, Odin made him Don Blake. I'm like, then how did he get a medical degree? You know,
Like,
and then
yeah, go. Sorry.
and then in Simonson run, he's like, well, now I'm Sigurd Jarlson. And it's like, who's that? He goes, I put on a work shirt. It's like it's so all over the place. And then when you get into the fact that he's a god, that brings religion into it. So I do like the play that it's like, nah, Asgard's a planet and they're really powerful. But he's hard to put a finger on. And I think one of the reasons we like Ragnarok so much is it kind of nails him.
He feels like a person, not a force of nature that has an attitude.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Which is great if you want to make the character relatable, but again, then he's not really a quote unquote god.
Which is fair.
Yeah.
That's very fair.
Oh, by the way, and if you haven't read Matt Fraction's run on Thor that he does, that's I'm guessing Taika Waititi is pulling from that because the baddie that Christian Bale plays is from Matt Fraction's run, and then of course Jason Aaron's Thor when Jane Foster becomes the Mighty Thor. That's another one I'm sure he's pulling from. I saw the action figures, and I thought, oh, look, it looks like a mishmash of the movie version with the comic book version. Even the same helmet that Jane Foster wore in the comics, they've translated it for the film. So
yeah, the Jane Foster is really close to the comics, and I'm like, interesting that they can wrap that around Natalie Portman, who's pretty slender. She's petite, you know. She's got the body of a ballerina, which is why Black Swan still haunts everyone to this day.
Right.
Yep. But she said she's bulking up. I mean, she did an interview and she said that, oh yeah, I know I'm doing this, but I've got to bulk up now. She said something to the effect, I haven't carbed up yet. I've done the carb loading. I haven't gotten to the bulk part yet. So that should be interesting. The one thing that reminds you, the one thing that did annoy me about this film that I remember when I saw it the first time, I go, man, that was like the coolest part I liked about the helmet. His helmet that he wears in the very beginning of the movie, which is one of my favorite things about his character in the comics, that he never wears the helmet again after that first sequence.
You're paying for that face. You're paying for that beautiful face.
Yeah, I think I think that helmet's a little over designed because they went so crazy with it they covered his face. I was just saying we'll get to this at the in the later movies, but in terms of paying for that face, Mike, one of the things that always bothered me about the MCU is once you get to Civil War, everyone has a magical mask where they just like as soon as they stop fighting, it just pixelates over their face and it's like, look, it's Paul Rudd, everybody.
Yeah.
It's and we're still at the point where Tony has a faceplate that slowly lifts and shows this much face. So as this goes on, it's going to be less and less about the costume and more about the character. But I do think if they had designed that helmet to be smaller, like it was in the comics, he would have had more of a reason to wear it.
It's funny you should mention that whole thing about Robert Downey, because I just watched the David Letterman episode, where he interviews Robert on Netflix. That show he has on Netflix where he interviews folks, and he interviews Robert Downey Jr. And he RDJ himself goes, yeah, they asked me if I wanted to wear the helmet later on. I said, no, just put some dots on me here and then you can just add it later. You know, like how I would love to have that kind of stroke. You know, that kind of juice where
there was a long time he would have loved to have that kind of cloud too. There were a lot of years where people were like, "Get in the helmet." I'd say 94 to 2005, it would have been "Get in the helmet, Robbie."
Yep.
And then I was watching the extras for Thor on Disney, and they got to the bit where they were talking about how the effect that Kenneth Branagh had on the set directing this film. And I don't know, it sounded like the actors were just trying to like say nice things, you know, because they're showing actual scenes where Branagh's going, okay, now let's do this here. Okay, now let's do that again. Now okay, now you gave me this, now give me that. I'm like, oh man, this guy would drive me nuts if I were on the set. If this were my director right now, I'd be like, okay. Because I know Branagh would comment later on after doing the Harry Potter films. He was kind of, upset, not upset, but he was a little disappointed that they never asked him to come back and direct one of them.
Wow. I mean, is it me? And you can tell me this, Mike and Elliot. It feels like Kenneth Branagh's out of his element in this. Like, it seems like he's having a really hard time staging these action scenes.
Yes.
And he's kind of like, I feel like maybe he's on the set going, do it again, just so he has coverage.
Yeah.
Because he never makes a big special effects movie ever again after this. He's still directing. He's still, it's not like he's retired to character roles. But I don't think he shows that interest. A lot of these fight scenes look like he just went to the CG house and was like, you guys do it. The battle with the Frost Giants was hard to see in the theater.
Yeah.
And I watched this during the day and I just gave up. I was like, I could pull all the blinds down or I could just listen to what they're saying.
We talked about this last time, Mike, when we were talking about Incredible Hulk.
Yes.
Where the CGI for the Hulk, there's some scenes where it's just he's all muscly and standing in the rain.
Yeah.
In the dark. In the rain, in the dark. I'm like, what is this with everything happening in the dark, in the rain? And then for Thor, it's like in the dark, but in the snow.
Yeah. I feel like it's like a good workaround to make it. It's like, just CG it all. Who gives a shit? Just make it dark.
Yeah, and I also think it's like, this CG looks terrible. Turn it down. Just
rain.
Yeah. Turn on the rain filter. Pump down the contrast. They're still yelling, right? I have a hard time figuring out the scale of the Frost Giants because they're mostly like tight close-ups and people look up at them.
I would say beyond that, I want to give some props though where they're due. I mean, the imagery of Asgard, the way they did the bit, which is straight from the comics, where Asgard is kind of like on a plane and there's stuff under it. This is very Kirby. So then the camera, like it goes up through the dimensions, and then one moment we're under Asgard, then we're above Asgard, as like the whole planet is, the whole realm is flipping over. So when you have like that fight with the Frost Giants and they're being chased by that big thing that looks so much like a Rancor, but it's an ice Rancor, I guess. And then the thing falls through the ice.
That would be a Wampa.
Yeah, a Wampa, right. But then it continues chasing the Asgardians by running across the bottom of the ground, because I guess that's how the laws of physics work there. You can, as long as you got something to stand on, you can do it upside down if you want. I swear to God, though, I kept thinking, how many flat earthers watched this movie and went, yeah, that's what it's like
on the Frost Giant planet.
Say, told you.
When you get to the edge, that's what you see. The water just goes over the edge.
like the lobby of a Korean restaurant.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
I had up there. Oh, is that an
you don't have a Thor, John? You said you would have a figure for every movie
I do. I don't have a stand.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Wow, look at that.
This is my Avengers Marvel Legend Thor.
That's a nice Thor.
It is a nice story. It's held up really well. And Marvel Legends keeps raising prices and getting more money out of me just by doing that.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, yeah.
But
yeah,
here's my
I don't want to derail the conversation, but Hasbro released a Kickstarter Rancor like the Galactus, and it failed. And then a month later, Boba Fett rode a Rancor around town, smashing up everything. And my first thought was, well, now it would have succeeded.
Yeah.
There have been 4,000 people going, well, I need it now. And then I found a Jabba the Hutt in a used toy store. And the boys actually took the figures out, and I was not going to stop them. And we had everything out. And we had Boba Fett, and we had Jabba the Hutt. And I was like, and we then I looked at each other and be like, man, a big Rancor would have been really good right now. Marketing is timing.
Back to that figure that you just showed. I mean, and this is a thing that another observation I made about the movie.
Yeah.
When Thor first appears, again, with the helmet, the cape, everything, that costume looks so cool. I mean, it was, again, projecting Kirby. That's the way I pictured him from the comics. And for some reason, it just doesn't look as cool as the movie progresses. You know, he loses a cape at one point. I swear it looks different. I don't know if it was the lighting or they just couldn't make it functional enough so that when he's doing the big action scenes, maybe there was like one version of the costume for the talkie scenes and another version for the fighting scenes, but it never had the same coolness that when you first see it in the very beginning. And that was something that, again, later on, I'm like, man, I don't remember that happening, but now it's kind of like bumming me out.
Well, and again, like Captain America's suit, it's going to change every single appearance after this. The scales on the arms are from the J. Michael Straczynski run. And Joss Whedon drops them right away and said in an interview, he's like, I hate those. And he was clearly trying to get a Silver Age look back because he got rid of Iron Man's triangle arc reactor and got rid of Thor's scale arms. And Thor just keeps changing because what he wears in Ragnarok, I'm sure, is nothing like he's going to wear in Love and Thunder. But yeah, I feel like the costume they went with was easier to do than the classic suit. When he had, bare arms, and at one point in the 90s, he had no shirt on his sides. It just came around his abs because apparently Asgardian abs can grip fabric from the sides.
Yeah, it's true.
So I do think they did a good job, but yeah, he doesn't look comfortable in it. And then nobody does. I think there was a lot of stuff they hadn't thought through yet because they hadn't gone through this experience before.
Yes.
So they designed something that looked good in that scene, and then they needed to use it for the rest of the movie.
Mike, I'm curious, as someone who has written for Marvel Comics.
Yes.
What was that process like when you decided to did you pitch to them? Did they come to you? Did you say, hey, this is my level of fandom or geekdom? And, how did that kind of thing work for you?
I was recommended. I think basically they needed a short comic to fill out something, and someone recommended me to do it. And they emailed me. They're like, "Hey, do you want to do like a 6-pager?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And so I sent them 7 short story ideas, and then I went with the one that they liked. And then I just it's pretty nice. Like you write a script. There's no real standard way. At least there wasn't when I did it for them. They were like just, they gave me some examples. Got notes back. It was actually pretty smooth. But I think again, I wrote a very small comic, so I don't think I necessarily wasn't like jumping into like a run that needed to exist for a crossover later or something. So I had a little bit of freedom that way.
Yeah, and your story was drawn by Chris Bacalo.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I still have the art. I have not got it framed yet. I still have it in a large cardboard envelope.
All the art, or just some of the art?
Just some of the art.
I was
and
say,
he got it done because they gave him nonstop Spider-Man, and that became a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bacalo pages are sweet. Those are sweet.
Yeah.
But you have experience as a TV writer.
Yes.
Like what is it like? Have you ever considered like, have you ever said, "Hey, I would like to work on one of these MCU projects"? I mean,
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
Like I know with television and comedy, you break in, people know you write jokes, but also there's also the process of writing a spec script for like a television show. But what about if it was something like an MCU project?
I think it would depend on what the project was, whether or not it'd even be like, for a lot of them, they hire drama writers. Like something like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I think we're almost all drama people. WandaVision was, I think, maybe a couple comedy people, but I think that was mostly drama. Loki was, I think, 1 or 2 comedy people and mostly drama. So it's usually drama people and kind of screenwriters. They tend to sort of like it to be like kind of like, there's almost like they like their showrunner to be like somewhat like the voice of everything. And so it's usually like a limited room in that sense. But I would love to do that. And I would absolutely love to do that if that ever came around to me. As far as what I'd need to do, I honestly think it would just need to be the right show, and I would need to be available. And also they would need to like my spec script. So,
well, Don Payne is one of the credited screenwriters on here, and he was a Simpsons guy for a very long time. And I believe he wrote Rise of the Silver Surfer, and he was really making that transition into the MCU. And unfortunately he passed away not long after, but certainly on the publishing end, I think your comic came a few years after Seth Meyers and Bill Hader wrote a Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And there was a lot more synergy between Marvel and the comedy scene.
Yeah.
I think Axel Alonso was a big comedy guy. Certainly Jesse Falcon, who ran the Marvel Legends, was a big UCB guy. There was a time where that bridge was pretty solid.
I mean, I think, don't underestimate the value of having the Marvel offices just, a mile and a half away from the UCB theater. That's $5 to hang out and then drink. Like, when you're that physically close to each other, I feel like you get to intersect a lot better.
Yeah, it's funny. There's an article in Bleeding Cool today how the DC offices are going to like the hot desk format, which is a step below open office plan.
Yeah.
Which is another reason I'm going to try to never go into an office ever again. But they talked about like just how this was a further demeaning step after leaving New York, because again, that connection with comedy, the DC offices used to look onto Letterman.
Yeah.
Like when you walked by the Late Show marquee, you would see neon Batman signs in the building right across the street. And LA, I mean, you're closer to the film production, but everybody's a drive.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I feel like New York's such a big thing for comics. I don't know why. Like, just have like an office there with like 10 people in it, and then do the rest in LA.
Well,
I don't leave entirely.
I think that's what the Marvel offices are now.
That's what they kind of are. To be fair, that's what they kind of are now.
Yeah, they're still in pandemic mode, so they're all John Brevoort's not getting on the F train.
Forgive me, Mike. I know you and John have really talked about these things before, but this is my first chance to get to really,
sure.
talk about. So
we're also broadcasting this, by the way, Elliot.
Yeah,
so there might be other people looking at this.
Yes, and for folks who might not be familiar, so my thing though is that you talk about you have a lot of experience writing in television.
Sure.
And that fascinates me. It fascinates me, how a writer's room work. I know Marvel, for the Spider-Man books, Joe Quesada had this idea of using that formula for the monthly Spider-Man for a while. We're going to have a writer's room, and we're going to have all the Spider-Man writers together. We're going to hash out the year, and everyone writes like their episode. So if you did a couple issues for your episode, then you hand off to the next writer, and the next. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that kind of process in relation to comics?
I mean, honestly, I don't hate that as an idea. It's just as long as like you have a solid, one, you're not screwing over everybody if it's not some weird around the world, because, I'm part of a union. So it's a little bit different for me. If it's a way to trick into paying people less, then I dislike it. If it's like, oh, everyone gets a little piece.
Exposure.
Right. Exactly. But I don't hate that as an idea. But I don't hate that as an idea, as long as like it's like a television show where you're supposed to have an idea of where you want to go. As long as they're like breaking them together and whatnot. Like if their writer's room is sitting together and they have like, a whiteboard and they're writing out the plot of the year and they're like going like, no, then this happens. I think that's fine. But if it's a writer's room, but it's more like a newsroom where they're like, you go write this, you go write that, then that might be less of a cohesive whole.
Yeah. And there's been several success stories. I mean, as you said, Brand New Day was one. They're doing that right now with Spider-Man Beyond. Mike, when you and I used to do stand-up every night at the Improv, 52 was coming out, and we used to.
Oh God, yeah.
We used to sneak into Midtown Comics and pick up 6 issues at a clip because it was coming out every week, and that was a writer's room of Mark Waid, Grant Morrison, Kurt Busiek, Jeff Johns. So it can be done, and honestly, every line of title still has a summit. I mean, The Death of Superman was created in a ballroom in a hotel with all the writers and all the artists. They would do it once a year. But that said, if you're not the sole author of the monthly comic, does it have the same voice? Like, can you get a Chris Claremont's X-Men out of a writer's room?
And do you have like, is there a showrunner's overall voice? Like, is that a personality? Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Mike, you're the head writer right now for Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. We talked about this on Caffeinated Comics at the beginning of the pandemic, and we discussed a lot of how do you manage while being apart. And that was a great conversation for me because now I am a manager and I'm talking to people that live out of state. So that was helpful. But how do you run your room?
Honestly, the nice thing about our show is that it's a late night informational show. So it's less like we have to break, full narrative stories together now and write, 30-minute scripts. It's a little more like, we can outline a news story and we'll have a writer's room meeting for like 2 hours. And then usually people go off on their own and finish pieces.
Now, is that a 2-hour meeting for each episode or every day?
It's like a 2-hour meeting, a couple days of the week for each episode.
So like kind of like a long status.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But as far as managing the writers, we just talk to them every day and we have our meetings. We kind of not play it loose, but we're kind of like, you don't need to be on camera 8 hours a day. There's no benefit to us because we don't want to be on camera 8 hours a day. So we kind of run it almost like when you're needed, so be available when you're needed, but then you're kind of loose otherwise. I don't know. I just have friends on other shows and it's much tighter and it sounds a little harder to like sit in your bedroom looking at Zoom for 10 hours and pitching jokes just all day. I don't know if that sounds good. So I don't know. We wanted to make it a little more easy on people. And I mean, Kristen Bartlett, who's the other head writer. We are co-head writers. Is not like I'm not the queen.
And you guys kind of had the best of both worlds because you're a topical show that's weekly. So you're not where you were on the Tonight Show where every day is a monologue.
Yes, exactly.
But you're also not breaking down story arcs and figuring out this is where we are all season and this is what has to happen. You're not saying this is where Samantha needs to be this week because this is what's going to happen to her character next week. So it seems like you can kind of have a little bit of that freedom.
We do. I mean, and there's things like we do take into consideration, like, oh, we're preparing this evergreen story for this week. So maybe if we talk about it, this other thing this week, that kind of cannibalizes that. So there's those conversations too. It's also, we do a lot of sketches. So there's, sketch meetings where we'll do a short read through of a sketch. And now with remote viewing, we'll have like almost like we'll zoom into the set of them shooting a sketch and give notes that way. It's really it's less scheduled and a little more on the fly. Not by the seat of our pants, but kind of, it's not just like this moment we do this moment we do that. It's kind of like, oh, we're ready for this. Let's go.
Right. Yeah. Whereas other shows I know, like Colbert, because it's every day, it's like, okay, we're meeting at this time in the morning and then we're writing until this time. And then we're reviewing what we wrote. And then we're rewriting until this. You have a few days to play with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we do have a structure, like we do evergreen read-throughs on Friday. We do fact checks of evergreen pieces on Monday. On Tuesdays when we start talking about our topical pieces. So there's like a structure to the week. but it's more like when it gets done, it's done each day. It's not, oh God, it's 5 o'clock. He needs to be like, someone needs to be there right now. Like when I was at Fallon, Jimmy had to be on that stage at 5. We're now in a position, especially remote, where we'll delay an hour if Sam needs us to delay an hour because we don't even have an audience anymore. So we can like update a script if we need to without panicking.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Okay, bringing this back to Thor, because that's what we're talking about, right? So as a comedy writer yourself, and I'm sure I do the same thing. I have writer brain. Like when I'm watching a movie or a television show or reading a comic, my brain automatically starts breaking it down to how I would have done this, or how I'm always trying to guess what the writer is doing, see if he's going somewhere. I'm always, every once in a while, I'm very surprised. I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. I was thinking he was going to go this way. He went back, or she went that way. Right. So I always like that. When you're watching these films, like with your writer brain, what's that like? And do you ever sit there and, like, let's say when you rewatch this Thor film, you thought, man, I've got Kat Dennings there. We could have done this with her.
Not as far as the actual narrative of the story goes. Like sometimes I'll be like, I wish they had made this choice instead of this choice. But it's much more like the jokes, or I'm like, oh, you missed an opportunity to do this, which might have been fun here. Kind of like small moment to moment things where I'm like, they could have said this, or this would have been this. Like almost like I have more notes about dialogue than I ever do about the actual plot or the staging, just because those things are the things I'm bad at. So, right. But usually it's like jokes and stuff is what I'll notice. Well, I'll either be like, I wish I thought of that, or like, oh, I know what would be better.
Yeah, and to be fair, that's really where your career is come from. You were pitching jokes to Weekend Update. You got a job on the monologue at the Tonight Show. So your forte has always been really tight one-liners. So that's what you're hypercritical about.
Right. But like Spider-Man's got good jokes in a movie. I'm all right.
How about polishing, like script polishing?
I have done script punch-up. I've never done polishing. Like I've never been paid to take a whole script myself and just rewrite it. But I've definitely done script punch-up for movies. It's fun. Like you sit in a room, they pay you depending on the movie and depending on who is paying. Anywhere from like $1,000 to a couple thousand to more to sit in a room, and you watch an early cut of a movie, and it's kind of like half focus group, half joke pitching. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like, hey, what's like not funny for you guys here? Or like, what's this? And it's not like a focus group like we're answering a questionnaire. It's a little more like we're trying to figure out what would maybe in their minds be fix the movie. And you're also like being like, oh, I think we should do this. Or like, it's much funnier if X, Y, Z. And sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes they want just individual jokes for, like once I did, it was a Spanish language cartoon that Miramax bought and that they had translated into English, and they wanted us to rewrite jokes for all of the characters' lip flaps. It's like stuff like that.
Because I know, as someone who watches Spanish television, there's some jokes that just do not work in English.
No, I mean it was a movie about little like foosball table figures that come to life to save a village.
Oh, that's the Encanto sequel right there.
I don't see why that wouldn't work in America. It's so relatable.
No, I'm sorry, the Encanto prequel.
Pre-Canto.
It was a weird. I'm sure I don't know what it's called, but I'm sure I could find it. It's a very weird movie.
El Fútbol.
They were foosball characters who came to life.
Well, Mike, what would you think this first Thor movie would have needed the most punching up? Say you got that call from a Kevin Feige of like coming to the room at your level of like, we can't change the plot, we can't restage action scenes. What do you think would have helped? What would have made it better than fine?
You know what's hard to say is because the later movies do define Thor so well. So it's almost like I was saying, like when I compared it to Attack of the Clones, it feels like this has a lot of things I don't necessarily like, but they are built upon to things I really do like. And so I don't know. I mean, I wish that Loki was more Loki. I wish Thor was more Thor, but that's kind of like me retroactively looking at characters I now like that I didn't really give a shit about at first.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I honestly wish there was a little more. I don't know. I always wish there was more Loki, but I wouldn't know how to fix it.
Now you have 2 seasons of a show.
Yeah, which I love. But if in 2011 you asked me how to fix this, I would be like, I don't know. Make it interesting. And that's not a good note, really. I would not know how to fix that, though.
Yeah, there is a season 1-ness to this, to put it in terms of
yes.
time. There's like it's like Homer's got the wrong voice kind of thing. It's like, yeah, it's a show, and I have to build on it. Like I've been trying to get my girlfriend into Community, and I'm like, and I know she's not gonna have the patience to sit through season 1. And I'm like, well, I guess we're just going to have to do random episodes because it's not the show. It's not the reason to like it in season 1.
Right.
But there's a lot you need to know in season 1 moving forward. And I think,
which is hard.
This is doing the same thing of like, we're laying down track, you know?
Yeah.
You know, we're putting Nick Fury in it again. You know, there's not that many Easter eggs, which is nice. Because Iron Man 2, I think, suffers from it. It's like, oh, the Black Widow's here now. And, oh, you know, Nick Fury's going to come and resolve this plot line that you've been struggling with for 90 minutes and just take that away. Yeah. There's not a lot left hanging, which is a nice thing. It's self-contained. So if there was never another Thor movie again. That said, and this isn't really a conversation about this, but we are left with a cliffhanger that is instantly resolved. Of like, Thor destroys the Rainbow Bridge. He makes this ultimate sacrifice. He loses his love to protect Asgard, and then in Avengers he just drops on the plane. And even in the theater watching Avengers, I was like, "Hey, what? And there's like one line where he's like, "Oh, Odin did this. Is that what happened?" So I was like, "Well, then how come?" Because like Loki literally screams at him. He's like, if you destroy the bridge, you'll never see her again. Then Thor could have just gone like, my daddy will bring me back.
That's actually, that was one of the deleted scenes from that was the alternate ending for the movie where Jane Foster actually creates a beacon to guide Thor back to Earth. But
like E.T.?
Yeah, kind of actually. And I'm like, oh, that would have, had they gone with that particular ending, it would have made sense. But then it kind of like undercuts his sacrifice.
And Ike Perlmutter didn't want to pay for Natalie Portman to be in Avengers.
Yeah.
So Thor 4 is going to be really interesting too, because she is only in this and Dark World, and they build on this in Dark World, and then she is written off with one line of dialogue in Ragnarok by a girl that looks suspiciously like Kat Dennings. It's like, oh, Jane dumped you, and walks away. Almost like a Muppet comes into the frame. Oh, Jane dumped you. Just out. So it's going to be interesting how they reintegrate her back in, because so much of this movie is about their relationship, but then when Thor Ragnarok comes around, nobody cares about their relationship.
If you ask me, it's like Taika took the first 2 movies, just tore the scripts up and said, you know what, we're just going to do what we want. Mind you, did it very well. And again, pulled a lot from the comics. I mean, there was the Walt Simonson run that he pulled from, and a couple other things, and did it expertly. But again, I sit there and I go, wow, it's almost like they completely changed the character at this point. It's like, we didn't even need the first 2 movies to do this, you know.
And after watching this, I'd still agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's
like
you said.
Sorry.
No, go on. Kind of.
It feels very like Jadzia Dax type situation where it's like they're like, no, this isn't working. Let's make them fun. Let's make her fun. Mm-hmm. We tried to make her Spock. Let's make her fun.
Oh, I thought you meant it's a Jadzia Dax situation. Is like Cherry Farrell's getting sexually harassed and she just quit. So get that one within one episode of Kids in the Hall and make her Dax.
No. I mean, more like the first season, she's supposed to be like this, like wise, many-lived, and then the other, like subsequent season, she's like, well, I used to drink this way.
Yeah, and then she's best friends with Klingons.
Right. Yeah. That is to say that they changed the character when it wasn't working.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine is now more bittersweet to me than when it was airing, because at the beginning of the pandemic, I said, "Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to binge watch all season 7s of Deep Space Nine, and by the time I'm done, we'll be back to normal."
No.
I would say that Love and Thunder kind of saves the Thor franchise. I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, I think Chris Hemsworth was ready to say, I'm done. Don't need to do any more of these.
Thunder is going to be, apart from Avengers, the only fourth film. And granted, there's only Endgame's the fourth Avengers film because they did the Harry Potter thing to it. They were like, all right, we'll make 3 and 4 at the same time. But this is going to be the first Marvel film that comes back and starts a new production for a fourth movie. And for a character that was never the most popular in the comics, and a movie that we're all kind of shrugging off, is pretty impressive. I think that speaks not only to how well received Ragnarok was, also to get Natalie Portman, who swore to never come back.
Right. Yeah.
She pulled a Hugo Weaving. And then, but to make that kind of the flagship. And granted, Robert Downey Jr. was aging out. Chris Hemsworth is a young guy, so he could keep making these. He's not going to hurt himself yet. Chris Evans, I think Chris Evans had a couple more in him, but I think he was just kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. They initially asked Daniel Craig to be Thor.
That would have been crazy.
He turned it down because he was going to make Skyfall, so he didn't have the time. So, and considering No Time to Die, which we covered on your podcast, Shaken Not Hurt, we would not be getting Love and Thunder with Daniel Craig.
I just can't get over this. And I've got 2 comedy guys here, so I got to ask: how do you make all-powerful gods funny, and yet not strip them of their godlike qualities?
I mean, they've been doing it since Roman times, Greek times. They're all powerful, but they're also selfish.
They're also out of touch. They can't relate. It's kind of that fish out of water. I mean, it's Overboard.
Yeah.
Like Goldie Hawn, Kurt Russell, and Ken Branagh does it in this. I mean, he likes the cup of coffee and smashes it on the floor.
Right.
Then he goes to the pet shop and says, "Give me a dog big enough to ride." Those jokes work.
Yeah.
See, you're laughing right there.
Well, and that's the other thing that on the rewatch, I was like, I never thought of it, but when the Destroyer is going around blowing up buildings, he didn't blow up the pet shop, did he? No, because I would have been.
Oh, not.
Zack Snyder would have had him blow up the pet shop.
Zack Snyder, totally. Because it's another deleted scene where Kat has a puppy that she's running through the streets with, and gives us some random passer guy driving by. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. There was a pet shop,
Right.
The Destroyer.
To Stan Lee in the truck.
Can
I keep him? And it just drives off. The dog's driving like Groundhog Day.
I want to go back to giving this movie at least some props. The Destroyer looked pretty freaking awesome. I mean, faithful to the comic. I remember when I saw it the first time and then I saw this, I'm like, damn, that's right. I was seeing Sal Buscema, John Buscema. That's their design come to life, and it was just so well done. I mean, the face opens up and the fire comes out, and it was just, I was like, wow, this
holds up. I mean, this movie's now 11 years old, and that CG holds up really, really well. Luckily, he's made out of shiny metal, which CG can always do well. But just that scene where Sif stabs him through the neck and the whole body twists around to get basically the muzzle of the gun in her face.
Yeah.
It was still impressed me. It's the best fight in it, but the weird thing is it happens like at the end of Act 2.
And that's equally impressive is Clark Gregg, who I love, who appears as Agent Coulson first as a total badass. But the moment you mention the name Tony Stark, he turns into that really bothered, oh, that guy,
Yeah.
And it goes from this serious persona to this near comedic persona that only Clark Gregg can do on a dime. He just bing, bam, turn back to back. And I'm like, and I will always be a fan of his because, of course, you know, he's done like The West Wing, but he's also done New Adventures of Old Christine. And he does it so expertly in both shows. And in this movie showed that he can do both even in the same movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great in 500 Days of Summer too, which is a really underrated movie that I think more people should know about, especially because it stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Zooey Deschanel, who are much more famous than when they made that film. But yeah, you're right. He's the common thread, which is so upsetting in Avengers. Spoilers for that episode when they get rid of him. And you know, there's 7 seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but at that point, the television universe was more detached, and honestly, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was not the hit they wanted it to be. So they never brought him back to the movies because they didn't want to explain how they bring him back. The only time he's appeared is in Captain Marvel, which happened before Avengers. But yeah, he would have been a great through line and certainly cheaper than Samuel Jackson, who, you know, keep writing out so they don't have to use him all the time. They'll write him out at the end of Winter Soldier, and then they'll write him out. Then they wrote him out again at Far From Home. So, you know, he just comes in and goes. But it would have been nice to have that through line. And see, this is the first appearance of Agent Sitwell, who becomes a much bigger presence. I wasn't sure. He's so just dropped into that plot line that I didn't remember the first time we see him. Yeah. And when he appears, I'm like, oh yeah, we didn't see him in Iron Man 2. So we're starting to build. And of course, we haven't talked about this at all, but the star of the last Disney Plus show, Hawkeye, shows up for one scene, you know, just to kind of tease him. There's not much of a plot reason for him to be there. But at the time, it was pretty shocking to see somebody who's not technically a Thor character just pop in and go away.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, and that's a formula they're carrying through now. You know, you're going to have America Chavez showing up in the new Doctor Strange. It's like, let's have this character show up. Boom. Set him up for later. And now, even so, like, let's say Black Widow, let's take Yelena and then boom, drop her into Hawkeye. I did like seeing that. That reminded me, I was like, oh yeah. There are a lot of times I think we take it for granted now. The
crossover stuff.
All the crossover stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, now it's, you have to do it. I mean, Sony said that that's part of their deal with Tom Holland is they really can't make a Tom Holland movie without putting somebody in it. They said that's the reason Doctor Strange is in No Way Home, and he totally works for the story. He belongs there. But for a movie that has everybody that was ever in a Spider-Man movie ever, plus Doctor Strange, there's always another reason for it. And basically they trade off. They're like, we have to have an MCU character in this movie, and then they get to use him in something else. And we're going to get like wonky and wonkier ones, like Falcon's going to show up in Ant-Man for, you know, basically no reason. I think the last time we didn't do it is Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right.
You're going to have the future Captain America in what we call in wrestling terms, doing a job for Ant-Man, because he's going to have, you know, an inexperienced Scott Lang kind of like give him his lunch. And it's like, I don't know if that would work now. Some folks wouldn't be happy about that.
Well, now he's Captain America.
Now he's Captain America.
Have Ant-Man be Captain America.
Yep.
But Mike, we don't want to keep you all night as much as we could keep talking about the Marvel Universe. Last question to kind of follow up on something else. Disney Plus calls you, says you can take anybody we haven't done yet.
Yeah.
Stole my question.
Well, they're doing Moon Knight now, so I can't say that.
They made Luke Cage.
I'm trying to think. What's it called? Damage Control. Maybe Damage Control.
Oh yeah.
Damage Control. I feel wasn't it? They were going to do one, and I think it might have even went to a pilot, and they didn't do it.
Don't they reference Damage Control in one of the earlier
in
films?
Homecoming?
In Homecoming, yeah. Which I think you could still work with, though, like a working class comedy about people who clean up after superhero fights.
Yeah, DC did a show with Ron Funches, right? And Alan Tudyk. That was
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it was called Canceled.
Yes, it was canceled. Very, very.
It was like an office comedy near in like Metropolis, but nothing to do with anyone else.
Yeah, it was like Alan Tudyk was like Bruce Wayne's cousin.
It was something like that. Yeah,
it was very slapped together. But I was like, well, it was at the point where there wasn't so much superheroes on television. I was like, I guess I have to watch this too.
Yeah.
So it's been attempted, but yeah, that would have made a good Disney Plus show, especially if Disney decides to do something like a Lower Decks and really push the tone far out, yet staying in the same universe. But Mike, how can we follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter at Mike Drucker, MikeDrucker, on Instagram at Mike Drucker is dead, and Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, 10 p.m. on Thursdays on TBS.
And where is that streaming? Is it HBO Max has it? Or
HBO Max has it. YouTube also has episodes like the next day. So either way.
Sweet. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Your new like Jim Rashy look. I'm
trying. You know, I just got to try different things, figure out what works for me.
Yeah. I feel like right now you're skinny and I'm fat.
Listen, we're just going to keep training the rest of our lives.
It's like this amount of fat that's just, it's like Captain Marvel and Rick Jones.
Yes. Yes. Sure.
Mike, I had announced earlier I want to start a new podcast called 4 Flanneled Fatties. So if you know any fatties wearing flannel, send them my way.
I will send them your way.
Mike would have been a good candidate when we met, but not
when
now.
we met long ago. But yeah, those days are gone.
I believe you had the flannel.
Hopefully.
Well, great to see you.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Real pleasure.
So, Elliot, final thoughts on Thor?
Well, you know, fun. I enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it just as much this time as I did the first time. Was it better? No, it was fun. It held up in my mind much better than I think I would expect. Not so sure what the Dark World is going to do for me, don't have to worry about that though for a bit.
No, it's going. Dark World. My experience with the Dark World every single time is the first half an hour. I go, why don't I like this? And then I never finish the last half hour. So it's going to be a slow. It's going to be a slow going, that one. But we are. I had the same feeling about this one as I always do. As Mike said, it's just fine. It's really got some pacing problems because there's parts of it I really like, and there's parts of it where I am doing housework. Like it does not hold my attention for 2 hours in the way that even Iron Man 2 did. And Iron Man 2 was a mess, but it was always doing something interesting and it always had an energy. I feel like Kenneth Branagh would get inspired and get tired, and you really feel that as a viewer. But if you don't want to watch this one, honestly, I think when you see Thor and Loki and Avengers, you'll get it. Yeah.
And quite honestly, Thor Ragnarok tears up all the preconcept, everything that they established in the first two films. They said, you know what? Mind you, it's not like Taika took everything and discarded it and said, forget it. In fact, if anything, he's very clever in showing how Odin's relationship to, let's say, humankind and the other realms has evolved.
Taika really does what James Gunn did with Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
That movie is a sequel to the original one. But if you don't want to watch the original one, you don't have to.
Right.
And to be fair, most people, I think, casual people come into the MCU through the Avengers.
Yeah.
I would say the Avengers, Iron Man, or Spider-Man. The characters they know the best. And then when they're really into it, they go, oh, well, let me look at what Captain America movies are, or what Ant-Man movies are, what Thor movies are. So I don't think you're going to get a lot of people coming into this movie blind unless they're doing what we're doing now of like, I want to start the MCU and I haven't seen it before.
So if you haven't seen this one, don't worry, you're not missing a whole lot. And I will say, moving forward, even in each phase, you don't, there are some movies you can skip regardless of what phase we're in. As you say, the Avengers movies are always the big payoffs, as we will learn with each successive phase leading up to Infinity War, which is the huge payoff. Again, you're still dropping the seeds for that right now.
And the dust is still settling from Endgame, which I mein, the pandemic has a lot to do with that. But since Endgame, what we've been doing is introducing new characters, all smaller characters, and going to Disney Plus to extend the lives of the characters that we already know. We do not have another big Avengers movie on the horizon. We don't have another big movie on the horizon. We have extensions. We have sequels to characters we already have, but we do not have a big crossover coming. I mean, some people say that the Fantastic Four will end up being a big Marvel Universe movie, but we have nothing to go on that yet. We don't even have a release date for that movie.
And really, the only thing we know right now is the big bad, and that would be Kang. And Feige himself has said there's no Avengers 5 planned right now.
Yeah, and in recently on the behind the scenes of I think it was Hawkeye, he said after the final Avengers film. And yeah, there is no Avengers 5. And honestly, we've taken so many of the big players off the board with Captain America and Iron Man, and the unfortunate loss of Black Panther, that an Avengers movie, a fifth Avengers movie, would be a lot of Disney Plus characters and Spider-Man. I mean, so this is the real testing period of, Spider-Man No Way Home is one of the biggest movies ever made. It's fantastic. It's kind of an MCU movie. I mean, Sony still owns the rights, and they released it, but it's still a Spider-Man movie. And so people came out because he's the most well-known superhero character. Only Superman and Batman are above Spider-Man. So I think Doctor Strange is going to be a real test of how well the MCU stands on its own legs.
I have a feeling that it's going to do very well because there are some expectations for Doctor Strange. There's already the rumors going around that Patrick Stewart's going to be in this one as Professor X.
Sounded like his voice in the trailer.
Yeah. You had a lot of that building up the anticipation for No Way Home. The whole thing that, we're going to get all three Spider-Men. We're bringing the multiverse into the Marvel Universe, which when you think about it, I mean, if you're at DC right now, and you're like, son of a bitch, we're the ones who first started doing multiverses. How is it that Marvel can just walk in, take something that we've always done, and now they're getting all the hype off of it?
Oh, you mean like Secret Wars? That's what they did in publishing in the 80s. They worked on Crisis for 2 years, and Jim Shooter went, hey, I got a toy deal with Mattel. And outsold them. And on top of that, use a marketing play. The only reason they called it Secret Wars is because the term secret and war, it markets well. It's like it gets really good. Kids are into it. Yeah, that came from Mattel. And I was 12 in 1984, and I wanted to know all about those Secret Wars.
So.
Yeah. So the next film we're going to cover will be Captain America, the First Avenger.
Directed by Joe Johnston, starring Chris Evans and Haley Atwell. And
Tommy Lee Jones.
And I keep forgetting that Tommy Lee Jones is in this one. Who's going to be our special guest for that one?
We are going to have another comedian. Mike Lawrence will be appearing on that one. And Mike is a great touring comedian whose album was called Sadamantium, which gives you an idea of how big a fan he is. But he's also a writer. He's been contributing to Weekend Update lately. So really excited to have him on.
So was I. And I'm telling you, thanks for getting Mike Drucker on. That was really fun talking to him and getting his insights. And again, we all know who the alpha in the room was. The guy who's getting paid to write the jokes.
Mike and I saw Iron Man 1 together in a theater in Times Square.
Sweet.
And walked out, and there were about 8 of us when actually Mike Lawrence was with us in that group, who will be on the next show. We all walked out of that theater. Mike Drucker turned around, looked at the whole group, and went, "The motherfucking Avengers Initiative." And then we were all really quiet because Kumail Nanjiani was coming and he was going to see the next show, and we didn't want to give him spoilers because we figured Kumail would be into the MCU.
Yeah, really, literally. And of course, that in the closing credits of Thor, it says that Thor will return in the Avengers. I remember seeing that in the theater and how people cheered when they saw that. So Thor, Marvel was already on its way to really building something. Real quick, because they've been with us this evening, Lehman and Susan, thank you so much for watching us, being with us this evening, and watching the conversation. Your presence was noted. For everyone who watched us live, thank you for joining us. For all of you who are watching us on the replay, if you're watching this as one of the in our archive, whether it's on Twitch, Facebook, or YouTube, you just check out all the other accompanying videos that are here to our earlier conversations about the Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2. John, just so you know, because I did just listen to the podcast, which premieres on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network a week after the live stream, and our conversation with Michelle Saleo. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yep.
Great conversation with her about Iron Man 2, which was made even funnier considering she hadn't even seen the movie.
She misread the email and watched Iron Man 1 twice.
But we still had a lot of great conversation with her about the comic book industry, about her father working for Harvey Comics, about how she feels about superheroes and the comic book industry, as well as she didn't want to talk so much about herself, which was kind of okay. I get it.
It could be that way. But we also learned that her dad never liked Stan Lee.
Never liked Stan Lee, and she's never been to a party with a drunken Jim Steranko. But the things that she has experienced, if you haven't listened to that particular episode, check it out on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network or here on the video archives.
Yeah, we usually run them a week after, but you and I were very, very angry at the Comixology update, so that became an episode which bumped everything back a little bit. And I believe this weekend, the Matt Reeves Batman is coming out, so we'll be sure to cover that on the audio podcast this week.
I got invited to the press screening of that, and I decided to pass on it. I will go watch it and pay for it like everybody else.
It's almost 3 hours long, and it's got a 94 on Rotten Tomatoes right now.
I'm hearing nothing. I'm just hearing good stuff about it. The one thing I read was an early review, was spoiler-free. They said it was like an episode of the animated series, but done in a contemporary noir format.
Most of the reviews I'm seeing say this is the most like the comics that any Batman movie has ever been.
Which sounds good.
And the only bad reviews I have read have been like, why isn't the Joker in this?
Oh God.
I'm personally glad. I think we've had enough Joker. We had a movie that had a Joker with no Batman. Let's get a Batman movie with no Joker.
Well, we got the Riddler in this one. Who has yet
we have the Riddler and Catwoman and Penguin in this one.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be good to just see Batman again and not have to bring in everything else.
And then considering Robert Pattinson would love to do Death in the Family for the next Batman movie, which means now you got to introduce Robin.
Yeah, they have to get a Robin and then kill that Robin. In the same movie? I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Are they going to introduce Robin in this one and we just don't know it? Was he dropping that we didn't realize? Is that a spoiler?
I don't know. Remember, there was a rumor going around Batman Begins that Joffrey from Game of Thrones was going to be Robin because he got a batarang from him, and then Chris Nolan never made a Robin.
No,
unless you want to count Joseph Gordon-Levitt as a cop whose original name was Robin,
but who will just be the next Batman.
Yeah,
we would call him like the Batman Beyond.
Yes, exactly.
So the next episode we'll be talking about Avengers and
Captain America. No, it'll be Captain America for
Captain America. I'm sorry. And for the big after that will be the Avengers, and that will be the big one. That's going to be the unification of Shaken Not Heard and Caffeinated Comics, both hosts from both shows.
That's right. Dave Pinto and Stephen Brown will be joining us for that.
Yep.
That'll be our first 4. That'll be a Fantastic 4 for Avengers. And yes, I'm mixing my Marvel metaphors.
And that will be closing out phase 1 of the MCU. Then, of course, going into phase 2, lots more movies, lots more guests. We have lots of folks who want to join us and talk about their favorite films. So if you're not already subscribed to the MCU ReVU on Facebook, on Twitch, on YouTube, please do so. Like our pages, give us a like, subscribe, hit those notifications on the YouTube page. Share, please, if you can. If we can get more subscribers on the MCU ReVU YouTube page, we can get a custom URL. So that would help us a lot. I'm good. I had fun. I ran out of Southern Comfort. So
you didn't drink a bottle of Southern Comfort, did you? Well, not in this episode.
No, it was a little.
All right. I've been working on a Zevia because I'm 50 and fat. But hey, you can follow me at Not in My Book on Twitter and Instagram. That is my Twitter handle. That is also where I post all the Caffeinated Comics information. And you can also follow the facebook.com/Caffeinated Comics page, which is broadcasting this show right now, as well as the MCU ReVU Facebook page. And Elliot, how do we find you online?
You can find me at Elliot Serrano on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook at facebook.com King of Geeks Chicago. And yes, also check out the Shaken Not Heard Facebook page, YouTube page, and Instagram. Just go facebook.com/Shaken Not Heard. And you'll see our conversations about the James Bond world between me and Dave Pinto. Dave Pinto, who's usually a part of this show, but again, regretfully could not be with us tonight due to family issues, but he will be back for our next episode. Well, until next time, folks. Hey, John, good seeing you. Good seeing all of y'all out there. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time when we're talking about Captain Avenger, the first Captain Avenger was actually Hero for Hire, starring John Ritter.
Oh, I thought he was Condor Man.
No, he was Captain Avenger. Condor Man, that's a Disney movie, Condor Man, actually, which I would always confuse with Day of the Condor. But again, so much useless knowledge in my head. That's why I'm always forgetting people's birthdays. See y'all, everybody.
Excelsior.